Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we got to go over an incident that happened in New York City. Yes, it's another squatting incident. However, this one appears to be a bit different because in this particular case, rather than using the law in order to attack the legitimate owner of the property, the squatters appear to have killed the woman. I mean, she is dead, but the crime is alleged right now. That's why I'm saying appear. But needless to say, it's an absolutely terrible situation, and I don't quite understand why this is allowed to go on over and over and over again in these big buildings with a lot of people where presumably somebody should notice two teenagers breaking into a 19th floor apartment. Now we're going to get into that, but before we do, this video is sponsored, so let me toss it to the sponsor, then we'll come back over here and discuss this on the other side. Cold turkey may be good on sandwiches, but there's a better way to break your bad habit. And no, I'm not talking about summoning a shadow spirit to reach into your heart and yank that habit out by force. What I'm talking about is Fume. Fume is an award-winning device that works on the basic principle that not everything about a bad habit is bad, and what we should try to do is eliminate the bad part, and then we're left with the good habit. That's why instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. Instead of vapor, Fume just has flavored air, and instead of harmful chemicals, Fume just has delicious all-natural flavors, like crisp mint, maple pepper, orange vanilla, and sparkling grapefruit. Plus, it's got magnets and a bunch of different moving parts for fidgeting, so it will be able to distract your hands and all of that, because again, the principle is removing the bad from the bad habits. Now, if you want to start your Fume journey properly, what you need to do is go to tryfume.com/actualjustice, where you can get 10% off your first journey pack. You can also get to the website by scanning the QR code right there. And again, that's tryfume.com/actualjustice. Use code actualjustice for an additional discount.
Now to our breaking news. Squatters accused of killing a woman who encountered them in her late mother's apartment in Kips Bay are now in police custody.
Investigative reporter Dan Krauth live in the newsroom with those breaking details. Hi there, Dan.
So Dan Krauth, by the way, if you guys don't know, is the official ABC News local affiliate that has to interact with all these squatter stories based on the fact that he was out there for that Douglason story where the elderly couple bought a home for their kid with Down syndrome so that when they passed, the home was in their other kid's neighborhood. The kid could easily transition to their brother's home.
This guy just literally broke down my door. Broke through myself and my daughter to get in here. This guy just forced himself into my house. No, he did not. Yes, he did. No, he did and not. So did you. You broke through the front door.
Officer. The man called the police on her.
So why is it that I have to leave and he doesn't have to leave?
Because technically he can't be kicked out. We need to go to court.
They consider this a landlord-tenant issue, and by law it has to be handled through the housing court, not with police.
The police department doesn't have the lease?
No.
He's got no documentation.
Just bills.
So Adele, you're getting arrested right now?
I'm being arrested.
For what?
For being in my own home.
And where's your lease?
She's fighting the house. It's not her house anymore.
My deed is...
And then he really rose to prominence when he covered the story of a homeowner who got arrested by the police for trying to take back her own home from squatters. So now officially, this is this man's whole life. He is squatting on this territory in the newsroom and nobody's going to move him off of it for at least 20 months to 2 years.
Hi, Janice. This is one of a handful of high-profile stories involving squatters that we've been covering over the past few days. The suspects, ages 16 and 19 years old, were captured in York, Pennsylvania, which is about 2 hours west of Philadelphia.
Even though our buddy Dan right here seems to think that he's on point, I just want to point out that no, the suspects are not ages 19 and ages 16 years old. That was due to early reporting. I will give you the names of the suspects from the New York Post article because they name them and shame them, and one of the things that I'm starting to notice is that the local news is moving away from identifying the people behind these crimes. So according to the New York Post, the suspects are 19-year-old Haley Tejada and 18-year-old Kensley Alston. I don't know if these are both women or one of these is a male. I'm not really sure about that Kensley name. And they were actually arrested after they crashed the vehicle of 52-year-old Nadia Vitels, who was the woman who was killed and left in a duffel bag in the 19th floor apartment on East 31st Street that was left by her late mother.
Take a look. Police say they're wanting a connection with the brutal death of Nadia Vitel. She lives in Spain and traveled to her mother's apartment in Kips Bay last week. It's an apartment that had been empty for a few months since her mother's death.
Now, I just want you to think about this. This woman lives in Spain, abroad. She has a mother. She lives in New York City, in Manhattan, East 31st Street. Very expensive kind of property, 19th floor apartment. It was probably nice. And she finds out that her mother died. Now, like many Americans, if you're living far away from your relative, you probably don't have the money to come over and take care of it right away, immediately, especially when the situation is related to an apartment. So she waits just a couple of months, and then she goes to clean out her mother's stuff. Obviously a tragic situation, losing a parent and whatnot. And then when she gets there, she discovers a 19-year-old and an 18-year-old living in the apartment. But then things escalate because, squatters have God-tier rights. The property is theirs because they decided to steal it. So a fight ensues, and during the course of this physical altercation, the 52-year-old woman ends up being slammed against the wall, blunt force trauma.
Police say when Vittel arrived, she found two squatters inside the 19th floor apartment. A struggle broke out and the victim was slammed against the wall and died of blunt force trauma to the head. Her body then stuffed inside a duffel bag.
And it's not actually clear right now if this woman died from that blunt force trauma immediately or after they put her in the duffel bag and stuffed her in the closet. That eventually led to her death. And then these people end up stealing her vehicle because, they already stole her mother's property. They already stole her life. They might as well take her car, which of course they drove like maniacs, and ended up crashing in Pennsylvania before the marshals ended up hunting them down.
Police say the suspects then stole the victim's car, crashed it in Pennsylvania, and then took off. We spoke with the building superintendent last night, who said he has no idea how the squatters knew her apartment was empty.
Now, I would like to know the answer to this question, how they found that this 19th floor apartment was empty, because normally it's not the easiest thing in the world to get into New York City buildings in this way. Typically, a kind of building like this will have a doorman, and honestly, I don't care what kind of security system you have, no security is more secure than a New York City doorman, so I'm assuming somebody on the inside, and I'm just speculating right here, gave them the tip.
I'm wondering how they knew, about this apartment.
How they picked it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem like they were just trying out other apartments. It seems like they just went straight up to the 19th floor.
Now, to be clear, I actually don't think it's this individual at all whatsoever. Usually a building super, if they're going to do something kind of shicey like this, they'll do so in order to pocket some kind of money, some kind of rent. But in reality, it's so risky a proposition in the city of New York because you could just get in there for 30 days and not pay anything to anyone at all because of squatters' rights. And this 19-year-old and 18-year-old were unlikely to have the amount of money in order to cover this particular situation. So again, to be clear, while I do think somebody might have given them a tip from inside the building, I really legitimately don't think it's this building super, because if you're a building super, you get an apartment to live typically in the building and you get a decent amount of pay, and I don't think it's worth the risk if I'm being perfectly honest. Now, in this particular case, according to the New York Post, her 23-year-old son ended up sending her messages and she wasn't responding. So he decided to call the police for a wellness check. He showed up to the apartment before the police were scheduled to do the wellness check, where he ran into the supervisor right there, which is, by the way, one of the reasons why I think if there was an inside man, it's definitely not him. And with the help of the super before the police got there, he was let into the apartment so that they could look around. And upon being let into the apartment, he ended up discovering his mother's body in a duffel bag that he nearly overlooked. So here you have a 23-year-old man who lost his grandmother a couple of months ago. His mother comes to New York City in order to clear out some of the stuff, returning from a long trip to Spain, and then all of a sudden he ends up noticing a duffel bag when his mom hasn't been answering her messages, her car's gone, and it's his mother's dead body. These monsters killed this woman and stuffed her in a duffel bag like she was trash and abandoned the apartment. Now, it's also reported by the Post that his mother's foot was sticking out of the bag, and not only did she die from blunt force trauma, which the local ABC affiliate very much painted to me like she was thrown against the wall and then they stuffed her in the duffel bag and left, but it turns out she had multiple broken bones in her face, broken ribs, because these two individuals beat her savagely. They beat her savagely for daring to come into her own dead mother's apartment because they had conquered it as squatters who have God-tier rights in the United States of America, specifically in left-wing cities like New York City. Now, not only did they beat this woman absolutely savagely, but they robbed her. They took her wallet, they took her car, as I told you before, they sped off, and they went on a shopping spree. Just imagine the headspace that you have to be in to break into a woman's place, try to squat there so you could live there forever because, you have a god tier right to this particular apartment. Then a woman shows up, 52 years old, you beat her to death savagely. Maybe she's alive when you left her. You stuff her in a duffel bag, but you make sure to go through all of her stuff, take all of her property, so you can go on a bit of a spending spree as you flee the state of New York. That's exactly what these individuals did. Now, by the way, if you think criminals are smart, I just want to point out that Alston, the 19-year-old girl in this particular situation, gave a fake name of Rose, but decided to give an address that actually was her legitimate grandmother's address, and that ended up tying her to the Big Apple because she ended up admitting through that she lived there, but she didn't have a driver's license that indicated that. Now, Tejada was arrested at least one prior time for assault in February. Very interesting that this guy was arrested in February. It's now March, according to police sources, and he probably has an extensive criminal history based on the fact that he's 18, and we would not know if he had an extensive criminal history if he was arrested before he was age 18. Now, what's probably the craziest part about this whole situation is that we actually had District Attorney Alvin Bragg release a statement about this particular crime, and what he said was, just because these two were murderers doesn't mean it's acceptable to illegally evict them, so even if they are convicted of murder and they are given life in prison, they will still retain their rights, and you still have to evict them through eviction court properly over the course of 2 years in order to deal with this situation about whether or not they have possession of the property. Obviously, I'm just kidding about that, but honestly, based on the way that New York works right now, where people get same-day automatic release for violent crimes and squatters are allowed to fight it out in the legal system for years, I wouldn't be surprised if somehow these people ended up living in that apartment after the fact, after they got out of jail on bail, even though they were fugitives and they're accused of this brutal murder. I'm just saying, it wouldn't be surprising if that was the outcome. Now, again, as of right now, they do not know how these people were able to enter the apartment, how they found out about the missing apartment. I speculate that maybe somebody on the inside gave them a tip, but honestly, it could just as easily be a situation where the apartment being vacant for about 4 months, and this is likely the reason why she was going to go clean out the apartment, was listed early for rent, because we know for a fact this is something that is targeted by these squatter scammers. But the fact of the matter is, these squatter scammers ended up turning murderers incredibly quickly. And to me, I find the prospect of going away on a trip after the death of your relative, returning a few months later, going to clean out that dead relative's apartment that you're still paying for, and then finding brutal murderers who want to beat you to death in order to rob you, in order to take off, for you committing the crime of trying to collect the possessions of your mother. And now we have a situation where a young man aged 23 lost his grandmother a few months ago and now lost his mother, all due to this senseless nonsense that is allowed to go on in the city of New York. But hey, you know what? Those are just my thoughts on this particular situation. I want to know your thoughts, so tell me them in the comments below. If you like this video, then show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about squatters turned murderers. Till next time.